Hello and welcome to Biology Day 77. Continuing on here, we've got your warm-up questions, so we'll turn those in on day 80. We've got our warm-up questions here. So you can pause the video, you can look at those as you want. I'm going to move past that. All right, there's the positive moment, class prayer, moment of silence. Again, the warm-up questions. And then, so due today is the Nerve and Muscle Lab. Continue working on the tutoring. And then new today is HO8, which is circulatory and respiratory system. So you'll print that worksheet out. And then there's a new quiz, the HOH quiz, so you can work on that as we go. Objectives of the day, so we've circulatory system. We'll talk about how it transports oxygen, nutrients, and other substances throughout the body and removes waste from tissue. And then blood flows through three various types of blood vessels: arteries, capillaries, and veins. And then blood consists of materials we call plasma, which is the liquid part, red blood cells, white blood cells, and then platelets. We'll get to them as well. And the respiratory system functions to pick up oxygen from the air and release carbon dioxide from our tissues, from our blood into the air. Key terms that we're dealing with, we'll talk about parts of the heart, like the atrium and the ventricles, different types of circulation throughout the body, like pulmonary and systemic circulation, and then different types of blood vessels. We just see those over there. Blood plasma, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and the different components of the respiratory system. So here you can see respiratory and circulatory system. Yeah, there's the GIF. If you're watching the screen cast, you can see the GIF being excited doing this thing. All right. So what's the function of the circulatory system? Really, the main function is to transport to the tissues oxygen and nutrients and remove from the tissues carbon dioxides and waste. All this is driven by the pumping of the heart. That's what actually pushes the blood through the body. So if we didn't have our heart pumping, then none of this transport and removal would happen. So it's super important that we have the heart pumping there. So we'll talk about we make the analogy that the circulatory system is sometimes kind of like roads. So we've got major roads like freeways and highways, and that's just where things are moving. You're not stopping and doing business in the middle of the road. Things are just kind of moving along, going from place to place. But then we get these little side roads over here where people can get in and out of their vehicles, and kind of like in our blood system, it works the same way. So most of the time, our blood is just moving through those arteries and veins, and then it gets down into the capillaries where things can actually happen and it can exchange stuff with the surrounding tissues. So focus on the heart first. So the heart is composed almost entirely of muscle. It has nervous tissue and connective tissue and some other things in there, but most entirely muscle. It began contracting before you were born and will stop only when you die. It doesn't get a rest. It just keeps going and going and going. Heart contracts, for average adult, our heart will contract about 72 times per minute, and that varies pretty good. In doing this with students measuring our heart rate, we've had students who've had a normal resting heart rate from as high as mid 90s to as low as like the mid 40s. So there's a pretty good stretch in there where your normal resting heart rate could be. And then each time your heart beats, it pumps on average about 70 milliliters of blood. So if you think of like a soda can, that's 350 milliliters of blood. So it takes about 5 pumps of your heart to fill up a soda can. So that's pretty cool. All right, continuing on. So when we look at the heart, we see that there's 4 chambers. The 2 upper chambers are the atrium, and the 2 lower chambers are the ventricles. And the atrium is where blood goes into the heart. So in the right atrium, blood comes in to the heart from these things called the vena cava. So we have a superior and inferior vena cava. In the left atrium, blood is coming back into the heart from what we call our pulmonary veins. And then in the ventricles, the blood is leaving the heart and it's going out. So the right ventricle is leaving out and going to our pulmonary artery. And from the left ventricle, it's hard to see, but it's kind of going underneath that pulmonary artery into what we call the aorta, which is the major artery leaving the heart there. So we'll look at this pathway of blood coming in the right atrium, right ventricle, out to the lungs, coming back in the left atrium, left ventricle, out to the body. So if we look at that kind of gives you the story. There's this kind of a story that goes along with this. I'll just kind of read it. So my friend Ray, here's Ray Charles, right? He's a famous musician, but Ray can be for RA, for right atrium. All right, my friend Ray decided to go on a trip, so he bought an RV. Right, there's RV, right ventricle or recreational vehicle. So Ray bought an RV, and on his trip, he went from Los Angeles. There's beautiful Los Angeles, which can be LA or left atrium, to Las Vegas, right? And we don't usually call it LV, but LV would be left ventricle or Las Vegas down there, right? So Ray, right, bought an RV, went from LA to Las Vegas, right? So you can kind of see the progression of the story. RA, RV, LA, LV, right? And moving on. Okay, so this next one shows an animation of the beating heart. So you can see up here would be kind of the right atrium, and then blood would come through that. These are what we call our atrioventricular valves into the right ventricle. And then it's going to go out of the right ventricle through there. That's the pulmonary valve where it's going to go up to the lungs. And then you can't see it, but back here would be the left atrium. Blood would come in there, and then it would come back down into this part, which is the left ventricle, and then tucked kind of back behind this little piece of tissue here is where it's going to go up to our aorta right there. So that's where that's going to come out. So that kind of gives you an idea of the heart doing its thing. But in order to get blood around the body, it has to travel through these tubes. Basically kind of the plumbing of the body is what we call our blood vessels. We'll focus on arteries, capillaries, and veins. So you can see the arteries down here, capillaries in the middle, and the veins down there. So here's our arteries, here's our capillaries, here's our vein. There's these intermediate things called arterioles and venules as well. And also there's these things called precapillary sphincters. And they talk about that in the Hemo, the Magnificent movie, and the little gatekeepers there. Okay, so go ahead and do your best to kind of name the different parts of what you're looking at here. So this one, that one, those, this, that. See if you can name that. And then check your notes or rewind the video to watch what you're seeing. All right, moving on. So the arteries, they're the large blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. So you can remember arteries are away. Arteries are away. They carry blood away from the heart. Because the heart's beating, it puts them under much more pressure. So they've got this relatively thick layer of smooth muscle to kind of constrain that heart as the blood as it beats, as the pressure increases on there. And that helps forces the blood to kind of move through and eventually branch off into the arterioles and into the capillaries and so on, which gets us to our capillaries are the smallest blood vessels. And it's important to note that really like, the whole point of the circulatory system is to move blood from capillary to capillary. So we can transport things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, nutrients, or waste, but all that is going capillary bed to capillary bed, right? So as a result, this is where we're doing the exchange. So these walls are extremely thin walls to allow stuff to diffuse in and out. On this picture over the right, these are, you may recognize, our muscle cells right there. And then this is a single capillary with individual red blood cells kind of working their way through. You can kind of see that's happening there. So that's as big as that one capillary is. All right, veins return blood back to the heart, so we're coming back away from the capillary. So we've dropped off our oxygen or nutrients and picked up our waste and carbon dioxide. Because veins are under less pressure, they need help moving blood in the right direction. So you've got blood down in your feet, and you need to move it back into your heart. So there's a whole series of one-way valves that, as the surrounding muscles clench, they squeeze that, and blood is going to move up through it. So the valves only open when they're squeezed, and then as blood moves back down, closes the valve so it doesn't flow back out. And then when we talk about different types of circulation, there's kind of two types of circulation we deal with. That's what we call systemic circulation, which is kind of to the body, and pulmonary circulation, which is out to the lungs. It's important to note that sometimes people see this blue and this red, and they think that red automatically means arteries and blue automatically means veins, and that's not the case. Red just means it has oxygen in it, and blue means that it is oxygen poor. And here you can see there's pictures of actual blood. So this is oxygen-rich blood, and that's oxygen-poor blood. It's not actually blue when it's in your body. It's just kind of a darker red. And so we'll talk about kind of where we see red and blue arteries and veins kind of in the picture and what that means there. So pulmonary circulation is going to the lungs, so it comes out of the right side of the heart, and it pumps oxygen-poor blood to the lungs, and then it returns oxygen-rich blood to the heart. So if you look at this picture at the bottom, here's the right side of our heart, Oxygen poor blood's going to come out, so it's something that's going away from the heart, so that's an artery, and it's going to go into the capillaries of the lungs, and then it's going to come back to the heart, and it's going to come back to the left atrium here. So these are pulmonary veins. So right side is pulmonary arteries going away, and then the left side pulmonary veins coming back to it. All right, that's the pulmonary system. Pulmonary is lungs. All right, and then systemic circulation is the left side of the heart. So this pumps oxygen-rich blood out to the rest of the body. So you can see the image here shows our left atrium, left ventricle, and then blood coming out to the rest of the body there. Eventually, capillaries in the body and our muscles elsewhere use that oxygen up, and then the blood needs to come back to get re-oxygenated, and it does that in the lungs, so it comes back into the right side there. All right, so that's a pretty good overview of systemic circulation. All right, so we're going to go ahead and take our first stretch break. So if you want to pause the video or get up and move around for a little bit, go ahead and do so. And I'm going to move on to part 2 in just a moment. All right, thanks.